Since the beginning of civilization, humanity has progressed. We built empires, created laws, and shaped societies in the name of justice. But hidden inside the history of those laws are some punishments so strange, so horrifying, and so merciless that even imagining them today feels deeply disturbing. Every single day, crimes are committed across the world, and every crime brings some form of punishment. Yet among all punishments, the most final, the most irreversible, is execution. Because once it is carried out, there is no return, no second chance, no escape. However, history shows us that execution was not always about simply ending life. Sometimes it was designed to create fear. Sometimes it was meant to set an example. And sometimes it was used to test the absolute limits of human suffering. There were methods so cruel and so unnatural that understanding them through modern eyes is almost impossible. So in today's episode, we are going to uncover some of the darkest execution methods ever recorded in history. Methods that reveal just how far human beings were willing to go in the name of punishment. And each one will force you to ask a terrifying question. How cruel can humans truly become?
Electric chair. One of the most discussed execution methods ever used in parts of the United States was the electric chair. In this process, the condemned prisoner was strapped tightly to a heavy wooden chair. Metal electrodes were attached to the hands, legs, and chest. A wet sponge was placed on the head so electricity could pass more effectively through the body. Then, suddenly, around 2,000 volts of electricity would surge directly through the prisoner. The shock was so intense that the nervous system collapsed almost instantly. But in many cases, death did not come with the first jolt. Witnesses reported that multiple shocks were sometimes required, while smoke rose from the body, and the smell of burning flesh filled the execution chamber. The first recorded use of this method was in New York in 1890 on a prisoner named William Kemmler. Those who watched described the scene as one of the most horrifying deaths they had ever witnessed.
Gas chamber. Another terrifying chapter in execution history is the gas chamber. This method became infamous during World War II, especially inside Nazi concentration camps, where millions of innocent people were killed using poisonous gas. Later, some American states also adopted this method legally. The prisoner was placed inside a completely sealed chamber made of steel and glass. Under the chair sat pellets of potassium cyanide. When activated through a chemical reaction, those pellets released deadly hydrogen cyanide gas into the chamber. As the gas spread, the prisoner slowly inhaled poison with every breath. Within seconds, the throat and lungs began to burn. Breathing became impossible. The victim would choke, panic, convulse, and spend several agonizing minutes fighting for air before death finally arrived. Because of that slow suffocation, the gas chamber became known as one of the most painful execution methods ever used. Stoning. Stoning is one of the oldest and harshest punishments in recorded history. Usually reserved for adultery or socially condemned crimes, the condemned person would be buried in the ground up to the waist, so escape was impossible. Then, in front of a crowd, people gathered together and began throwing stones. Not one bullet, not one sword strike, but dozens, sometimes hundreds of stones. The process continued until the body collapsed and life slowly faded away. This punishment was recorded in ancient Greece and later appeared in parts of the Middle East and South Asia. Its brutality came not only from the pain, but from the fact that it turned death into a public spectacle. Firing squad. One of the most recognizable execution methods in history is death by gunfire, also known as the firing squad. More than 70 countries have used this method at different times. Sometimes, a line of soldiers would stand in formation. Other times, a single marksman carried out the task. The prisoner was usually blindfolded, restrained, and positioned against a wall or post. Then, at the signal, multiple rifles fired at once. Within seconds, bullets tore through the chest and vital organs. Death often came fast, but not always instantly. Some countries still retain this method even today, making it one of the oldest execution practices that never fully disappeared. Flaying alive. Among the most horrifying punishments in human history is flaying alive. In this method, the victim's skin was slowly removed while they were still conscious. Using sharp knives, executioners peeled away flesh layer by layer to prolong suffering for as long as possible. This was not simply punishment. It was a public demonstration of power, a message from rulers to everyone watching. This is what happens to those who disobey. Victims reportedly screamed for death to come quickly, but death often took a very long time. Ancient Persia and parts of the Roman world recorded such practices, making it one of the darkest examples of calculated cruelty.
Lethal injection. In modern times, many people assume execution became more humane. But lethal injection proves that appearance can be deceiving. Used in several American states, this method looks peaceful from the outside. The prisoner lies strapped to a table while chemicals are injected into the bloodstream. First comes a sedative, then a paralytic drug that freezes the body. Finally, potassium chloride is delivered to stop the heart. From the viewing room, it may look silent and painless, but reports suggest the prisoner may still feel burning veins, internal suffocation, and helpless terror while being unable to move or scream. That silent stillness hides a death that may be far more agonizing than it appears.
Beheading. The act of removing the head from the body with a single strike is one of history's oldest execution methods. Ancient Rome, Greece, medieval Europe, and parts of the Middle East all used it. A skilled executioner aimed to kill in one clean blow. But if the strike failed, the suffering became unimaginable. Even today, this method remains associated with some of the most controversial legal systems in the world. Its speed may seem merciful compared to others, but the sheer visual horror of the act has made it one of history's most feared punishments. Elephant trampling. In parts of ancient India and Southeast Asia, rulers used trained war elephants to execute enemies. The condemned person was tied or laid on the ground in an open field. Then a massive elephant, following commands, stepped directly onto the victim. Bones shattered instantly, organs ruptured, and life ended beneath the crushing weight of several tons. Some rulers even went further, throwing prisoners to hungry lions or leopards for public entertainment. These punishments were not just executions. They were theatrical displays of absolute royal power. These were some of the strangest, darkest, and most brutal execution methods ever used in human history. Methods that leave us with one haunting question. Can human beings truly be this merciless? And where should the line between justice and cruelty be drawn? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dark journey through history, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and join us again for another untold chapter of the world's hidden past.